Season 5 of Stranger Things cannot suck. I mean, like, it can, but I think that there will be big ramifications, really big, huge, in fact, for kind of media and the industry if it does, in fact, suck. So let's jump into why I feel that Season 5 of Stranger Things just has to be good. So, first of all, I want to say that I love the show, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making this video. I've been watching it since Season 1, aired back in 2016, and I've watched every season since as it's come out. I've seen every season several times, and I'm not a blind fanboy. There are flaws to the show. There are issues, and I think there are enough issues that suggest there's a possibility the finale sucks. But I think that the show is, for the most part, just overwhelmingly good and pure, and I'm really excited to see a finale which just hopefully knocks it out of the park. But the main reason I wanted to talk about Stranger Things, beyond just the fact that I like it, is that I feel like Stranger Things is sort of the last big franchise. And not like ever of all time, but kind of, I don't know, of the era of the 2010s, of the 2020s. I don't really know, but I just feel that with the end of this show, we are ending something more than a Netflix series. And what I mean by that is that if you look at most of the major popular franchises of the past 10 or 15 years, such as Star Wars or the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's kind of this weird point where they all just stop, where they fall off. That doesn't mean that they stop making content, but they functionally stop existing. So first of all, we need to address that a really big thing happened after 2019, right at the beginning of 2020, and that was COVID. COVID absolutely changed the landscape for movies and TV and, everything else. There's kind of this like weird memory fog that we have societally where we just pretend that it didn't happen, but it did. And I think if you look at a lot of trends in cinema, there's quite a few which end at 2019 and quite a few which begin at 2020. But if we're focusing on specifically franchises, we can look at, again, Marvel and Star Wars and even Game of Thrones. And it's interesting that all three of these franchises came to a storytelling conclusion in 2019. Now, again, all three of these franchises have continued to have content produced within their canon, but things just aren't the same as they were before. And Stranger Things is unique in that it is one of the only franchises which was huge in the 2010s that has continued to be huge in the 2020s, largely because it did not reach its storytelling conclusion. However, despite what a lot of people predicted due to mixed reception to Season 3, and also due to a long wait time, partly due to COVID, Season 4 was a huge success, arguably the most successful of the series and breaking the most into culture and providing fans and just the casual viewer with perhaps the most iconic moments in the show. When you compare this to things like The Walking Dead, which limped on into the 2020s, or even The Mandalorian, Stranger Things has continued to grow as those shows just fizzled out and essentially died. Baby Yoda was a massive cultural icon, but like your mom probably can't tell me anything else about The Mandalorian, especially in recent seasons, beyond Baby Yoda being cute and there being like squishmallows of him. Most of the properties that we have that are popular now began after COVID and are catering to a new generation of viewers, such as Wednesday, for example. The closest thing that I can find TV show-wise to really compare to Stranger Things in terms of like fandom and continuing to grow and such that began in the 2010s would be The Boys, which began in 2019 and is still going strong post-COVID. However, there's a very big difference between The Boys and Stranger Things, and that is the accessibility. Obviously, part of the reason that things like Stranger Things and Harry Potter or the MCU or Star Wars were so successful is because the entire family can pull up to the theater or sit on the couch to watch those things. And yes, that does open up your fan base to a lot of teenagers and children, which can be annoying, but it also provides you with longevity, and it provides people with a familial experience, especially over time, that they can't get from just any property or work of art in the same way. Something like The Boys does not grow up and mature with its audience in the same way that Stranger Things does. And so in that sense, The Boys has always been closed off from a huge part of the population. Not that that means The Boys or things like it are inherently worse, they're simply different. And Stranger Things has the advantage of being accessible to almost everyone. Now, we have been told that allegedly the 5th season is rated TVMA, but I highly doubt that it's going to be a similar TVMA to something like The Boys. I've brought this up before, but as a high school teacher, my litmus test for whether something is breaking through culturally is always to ask my chronically online and rurally secluded teenage students if they know about or have seen a certain thing. And I'm sure this will come as no surprise. Almost all of them have watched Stranger Things at some point or, are at least aware of it. The same cannot be said for really almost any other show or property out there. And I did have a conversation with my film class about Stranger Things the other day when the trailer for Season 5 came out. And one of the kids brought up Invincible, which is coming to a close soon and will be a big deal and which a lot of people watch. And totally agree, that's a popular show as well. But I place it in a similar caliber to something like The Boys. And not only that, but just the mass awareness of it and also the huge marketing push behind Stranger Things it just absolutely dwarfs something like Invincible. Again, not to say that you need a massive marketing push or cultural awareness to have a fantastic show. You absolutely do not. But Stranger Things stands apart from these other popular franchise series because of its just sheer size and popularity. Again, polling my highly academic and socially plugged-in audience of teenagers, they're aware of Better Call Saul and Avatar, but they don't feel those properties in the same way that they feel Stranger Things. And I did a lesson today with my seniors which actually incorporated Andor, and not a single kid in that class of 30+ had seen Andor. Most of them didn't even know what it was. So that's a bummer. But really, I guess the thing I can most compare it to is Harry Potter. Stranger Things is the Harry Potter and the Star Wars of this generation. And maybe that means that 5 years from now, it's going to have completely evaporated and it'll just be gone culturally. I have no idea. But it is the Harry Potter of this generation, and by design, which is also, kind of another reason I think HBO Max trying to reboot Harry Potter is lame, because the new Harry Potter is right there. However, Stranger Things also feels notable to me in the wider media landscape right now because when it comes to these big franchises, we've had a pretty long and horrible run of just mediocre to terrible finales to long-running and popular TV shows or movie franchises. Game of Thrones was on air for less time than Stranger Things has been and had a massive cultural outreach despite being a grown-up show. And the ending of that, pretty much killed enthusiasm for finales because it was just so horrible. Game of Thrones is now the litmus test for whether a finale is good or bad. That's always going to be the finale that people compare it to. It replaced Lost in that regard. So, good job, Season 8. I guess you won something. But I bring up the Game of Thrones comparison because I don't know, the conversation around it and the vibe and the things that the writers say about it and said about it at the time remind me so much of what I'm seeing and hearing about Season 5 of Stranger Things. And that makes me more than a little nervous. So, first of all, let's get into the, John Wilkes Booth, John F. Kennedy conspiracy style type thing. Both Game of Thrones and Stranger Things are showrun by two guys who have D names. You've got D&D over here and the Duffer Brothers over here, so that makes me nervous. But in both cases, these sort of obscure creators are plucked onto this show that nobody expected to be successful and then turned it into this massive cultural phenomenon that in a lot of ways could never even match the hype, no matter how good it was. But the way that they talk about the properties in the finales is also very similar. I remember David Benioff and D.B. Weiss talking about the Game of Thrones finale as this huge, massive, incredible thing. It had the longest single fight sequence in cinematic history and all these other characters and things and places and huge budgets and long episode runtimes and etc. And I remember being so excited at the time, and I'm like, hell yeah, we're just swinging for the fences just like you showed with the finale. We're going big, and it's going to be amazing and fantastic. And I remember having conversations with my buddy Scott about it and some things that the actors and the creators were saying. And we were in the parking lot of Walmart, actually, at the time. And I remember just sort of pausing for a second. I said, hey, Scott, do you think there's any chance that it could, what if Season 8 of Game of Thrones sucks? And we were both kind of quiet for a minute, and then we both burst out laughing because we're like, there's no way something like that could ever happen.
Well, Danny kind of forgot about the Iron Fleet.
And anyways, I'm still a little bit burned from that experience all this time later, and I don't want Stranger Things to go the same direction. I just can't handle another loss. As somebody with no life and no friends and whose life, I pretend is a movie all the time, this is all I've got. So if the Duffer Brothers screw up season 5 of Stranger Things, well, that's the end of the book and movie guy, because David Benioff and D.B. Weiss already took half my life force away. I don't know. It's unhealthy, but it's true. But also in 2019, we had another finale. We had The Rise of Skywalker. It ended the Skywalker saga of Star Wars, or whatever the hell that's supposed to mean. And of course, that shit fucking sucked. That was horrible. So bad. One of the last movies I saw before COVID as well. I saw The Rise of Skywalker on Cats, basically back to back. And then the only other thing I saw at theaters before they all closed down forever was Birds of Prey, which was good. I'm a Birds of Prey head. Fuck you if you're not.
Is that a snot bubble? Ew, gross.
Anyways, though, forget about like Star Wars and Game of Thrones and all that. Referring back to Stranger Things, Netflix is going all in on this being a big cultural thing. Like, we're seeing marketing to rival The Rise of Skywalker and Game of Thrones and Avengers Endgame. Netflix is totally going all in on this, from the release date to the marketing to the merchandise. They want this to be a cultural conversation. They're dropping the season in 3 parts instead of just 1, with part 1 being on Thanksgiving, part 2 on Christmas, and part 3 on New Year's. Clearly, you're supposed to sit down with your friends, with your family, put your entire life aside, put it on pause, and watch the last season of our show, because it's going to be badass, and if you don't watch it, you're going to miss out on something. And I think Netflix is banking on this show being important enough to people that it will be viewed as part of the family holiday experience, rather than something people skip because they're shopping or skiing or whatever. And, like, say what you will about the ethics of that and the art becoming a product and the capitalist elements and things. Like, that's all there and it's all valid. But, I don't know. Maybe it's just the easily fooled caveman side of me. There is something magical and special about experiencing things with other people and feeling your entire life and everybody's entire life just kind of consumed by this thing, particularly when it's a fun thing, like a TV show that we all like, instead of some fucking horrible tragedy on the news that we all have to live through all the time. And, maybe that particularly is why I want this to be good, because it's a reminder that life doesn't have to be horrible all the time. It's a reminder that we have other things happening, and some might say that that makes it a distraction from the real fights and conversations that we should be having. But to me, the whole point of being a human being and living on this planet together is to create art and to celebrate art, and more importantly, to create and celebrate that art together. And I just think it is so cool and magical that so many different people across so many different age groups and times and places can feel connected to the product of 2 brothers, to the story of these kids in this made-up place from this distant time that I never even lived through, fighting these made-up monsters, and yet feeling so human and connected and important to all of those people's lives. That's just really cool to me. And as I mentioned, we have not been getting that in the same way the past few years as we used to. And so maybe it's just nostalgia, and I definitely know it's somewhat nostalgia, but this feels like a moment for us as a culture to reckon with the way we deal with and consume and live through media. Like, I see this especially with kids. Media, movies, books, music, comedy, whatever it is. Like, the way we engage with art has become so splintered and isolated and not just devoid of meaning, but devoid of connection, devoid of empathy. Everything is buried under so many layers of irony that I am excited a show which is as genuine and heartfelt as Stranger Things is breaking through that shattered divide and showing people that we can and should still have these moments together as a people, that we can rally around art in this way, and that it is important. And maybe I feel that way as well as we see more and more just AI slop on the rise, and as I see my students just like more and more bitter and disconnected from things in the world, and as I feel that way too, this just feels good. And I want it to keep feeling good, and I want it to end on a positive note so people remember that this is what TV, this is what movies, this is what art and culture can and should be like. so many things that are successful, especially on streaming, just don't break into the real world at all. I mean, look at how many of the like top 10 Netflix films or shows at any given moment or year or month just nobody has ever even heard of or talks about. People consume these things as like little robots, and it just goes nowhere and vanishes. And that's not to say that you can't enjoy things privately and independently. You can and you should, but again, Stranger Things is one of those rare pieces of media which just galvanizes people and connects and unites them in a way that I find very special. And beyond its cultural spellbinding abilities, I also think this is a show that is just genuinely great and that I've enjoyed watching see experiment and grow and change throughout its 4 seasons and 9 years, nearly 10, that it has been airing. And I'm just really not sure when we're going to see something like this again, largely due to fractured information, declining box office rates, these kind of weird slop Netflix and other streaming originals that nobody watches or gives a shit about. And I'm not saying that everything needs to be Stranger Things, but I think that every generation deserves its own Stranger Things. The other thing that I find really interesting about Stranger Things is that it is an original IP. It did not begin based on anything, not a book, not a comic. I don't know if you can call the 5th season as something still necessarily original, but this is its own contained story, and that's also what I find so cool about the Avatar films, is while, like Stranger Things, they are derivative in the sense that they're inspired by many other pieces of art and media out there, they are the unique product of like a team of people or one guy who is sitting down and writing and planning all of this stuff and not basing it specifically on anything. But I also am paying special attention to Stranger Things because I almost wonder if season 5 of the show is going to be the end of the nostalgia era. Like when I think about Stranger Things and the 30-year cycle that it is fulfilling, and like we've seen every generation do, I wonder what the 2050s are going to look like and what the nostalgia for this era is going to be. Because the culturally notable pieces of media and things that we have now are like all based on nostalgia for a past era. So is the future nostalgia, like the Dua Lipa album, just going to be nostalgia for nostalgia? Probably not, but I think it's something that bears thinking about and that we should seriously start considering when we think about like what we're going to show our kids someday. I mean, imagine sitting down with like your son or your daughter in 20 years and showing them Deadpool and Wolverine and like trying to explain the appeal of that film beyond the core story. That's not baggage that Stranger Things has. You sit down and you just watch through it. And while yes, there are references and cultural moments to the 80s, you don't have to understand those to understand and really feel the show the way you do with so much of this more meta-modernist and self-aware and frankly cynical media that we are giving billions of dollars to at the box office every year. With that in mind, again, I think there are ways that this could suck. For example, the first 5 minutes of the first episode just dropped today, and we see a CGI, de-aged Will Byers that I don't like. I like what's going on in the scene, and I like the Vecna stuff and everything, but that makes me a little bit nervous. Beyond that, however, I think the biggest issue with seasons 3 and 4 is that the show has gotten too big for its britches, and I'm worried that that might happen with Season 5. The Duffers insist that they're trying to scale things back to meet Season 1 a little bit and to return the show to its roots, but it's hard to do that without leaving characters by the wayside, characters that people like and plot points people enjoy from all of the past 4 seasons. Like this bullshit right here. The fuck do you mean he's not going to be in Season 5? He's the best character. He's with them at the end of Season 4. Doesn't even make sense. No, but thank God we've got a character poster for Derek Turnbow, more like turn around and put Argyle back in my show. But I'm optimistic that they can pull it all together, as well as call back to prior plotlines or characters such as Callie in Season 2 that were just sort of left hanging, and resolve those in a way that is satisfying and also not too clunky. But I don't want to spend too much time thinking about all the ways it could suck, because there are a lot, because mostly I just want this show to be good. For my own selfish, stupid consumer pea brain reasons. But also, like, just as someone who likes media and, likes writing and likes the industry, I don't ever want to see anything fail unless it's made in bad faith, and I don't think that the show is made in bad faith. the show just means a lot to me, and it has genuinely some of the most beautiful moments that like I've ever seen in TV. It's a wonderful piece of work from a consistent and dedicated group of artists and actors and composers and directors, writers who obviously really just care about what they're doing and want to make something good. But most importantly, the Duffers were inspired by the creators of their time. They were inspired and moved to make things by Steven Spielberg and Stephen King and so many other notable people from the 80s and beyond. And I think the coolest thing about the show is how many people, how many kids, how many future writers, directors, actors this show has inspired. And I think that if it ends on a positive note, it will continue inspiring people for generations. I don't want it to have a horrible ending that negates all of the great work of the past 10 years and just ends up shuffling itself into obscurity like The Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. I hope that this is a show with lasting impact and with lasting inspiration and continues to remind us that creativity, that human connection and artwork and feelings and love and earnesty are important and still have an important place in our society in 2025. Because to me, if we don't have any of that, I don't think we have much of anything. And some days it's really hard to feel like we have much of anything. So maybe I'm looking too far into it, but those are some of the reasons that to me Stranger Things Season 5 has to be good.